Everyone, welcome in. Today I am joined by two amazing women all the way from the UK, the Seed Sistas. So welcome in, ladies.
Hello,
Hi.
lovely to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so excited to share you with my followers here in the US. And I think I have some followers sprinkled around. That's the beauty of the technological age. But I feel like I remember when I first started listening to podcasts, you ladies were on the Eat Weeds podcast. I think this was like 4 or 5 years ago. And you were talking about daisies. And I just fell in love with you with the image of you picking daisies, completely unable to stop because it was like this obsessive can't stop. And it's so funny because, that's how I am with chamomile. And I get that sort of obsessive, like, oh, gotta pick the heads. And I just enjoyed so much the way you spoke with reverence about the plants, the earth, about social revolution, herbalism as activism. And so, and it was always a dream of mine to reach out to you. And so I was so extremely pleased when you said you would come on today and talk with us about your journey and how you came to herbalism and a little bit about your very, I think, unique work that you're doing in the world of herbal medicine.
Oh, that's really nice. And it is amazing, isn't it? This world of we call it the interweb, where we're in this webosphere of connection, and we can reach others who feel as passionate about nature and the earth and plants as ourselves from all over the globe. It's amazing.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. The ecosystem of herbalists. It's, we were all there all the time, but it's like now we're actually connected to each other, which is
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's nice you brought up that daisy because we love the daisy because it's often people's first connection with nature, and even if they've seemingly forgotten their connection to playing with plants or working with plants, when you bring up daisy and making daisy chains or picking off the petals and seeing who fancies you, he loves me not sort of vibe, then people remember that they've had that connection from early on. And yeah, daisy's a great one, or the chamomile, sister of of the daisy. But yeah, it's nice you brought that up as well. We love daisy.
Yeah. And you guys made an elixir. And this was another reason why I fell in love with your work is you brought it to like some like rave party and you were like feeding everyone this cordial elixir that you made with the daisies and with some other sort of aphrodisiac herbs. And I was like, because I'm always, I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about is finding alternatives. I think altered states, totally cool. There's a time and place, but there's also a lot of social gatherings where to have altering items that, or I would say more subtly altering items, right? Like having options of taking plants in ways that don't necessarily, separate us from our bodies, but kind of keep us more engaged. And, that was something that you had mentioned in that talk. And I was like, that's brilliant. Like, let's just dose everyone with like plant spirits and see, watch how that really changes the environment of a social gathering.
See what
Yeah.
happens.
The daisy actually told us to do that. When we're with plants, and I'm sure you and many of your listeners, when we're out and about, we have this communication, we interact, we literally speak to the plants and sing to the plants, and we hear messaging back. And Daisy shouted as loud as she possibly could, "Put me in, everyone, get me out there, because I'm about joy, innocence, connection to play." And who doesn't need that, especially in big gatherings and the rave world and places where people are potentially disconnecting or dumbing or dulling senses with other substances. Having this amazing fun spirit to come along and connect us in that social way has been a total joy.
And also that thing of like connecting people with something that isn't going to deplete or take away. And we noticed in our scene a lot of people, when you want to stop drinking alcohol or taking chemicals, then sometimes there was like a void for people, that they didn't necessarily want to stop connecting or feeling slightly altered or opened. And just being able to be there, because people were getting very socially awkward if they decided not to drink. And what we noticed that is, if you go to a party where everyone's drinking alcohol and you're not drinking, it's the other people often have a problem with you not drinking, because they feel like you're not joining in, even though sometimes you can be the most fun, because you don't have that dampening you down. And we wanted to be able to provide people with something that's kind to them, but also can really blast you open and have this fun connection. And the chili and the daisy and the valerian we put together in that mix, and it was brilliant going out exploring. And it's still a potion we make to this day.
Yeah, I really feel like the plants speak through you too in such beautiful, unique ways. And the way that you've been able to weave together your gifts and offerings is really unique. And I wanted to go back to where you started, which was you both you, Kaz and Fiona, you were in herb school together. Is that right?
Yeah, we met in Middlesex University. So in the UK, probably in the 90s, there used to be universities, which are grand establishments that are all proper brick and mortar and have been here for centuries. And then there were polytechnics, and the polytechnics were more they were more cardboard and cheap and a much kind of lower class of further education.
Or accessible, the polytechnics, weren't they, generally?
Yeah, they were, but they weren't as salubrious and pretty. And we ended up going to Middlesex University, which previously was a polytechnic, a couple of years after it became a university. And it is in a place that we call the armpit of London. It's quite a deprived area, and we were studying in porter cabins with mould up the wall. And the actual training, although it was extremely expensive when we were both still in debt for it to this day, we're very grateful for, because we came together, we were trained as medical herbalists, which is a rigorous training, and it nearly broke everyone that went into the training. We all had kind of mini breakdowns because of the kind of push towards this science as the only important aspect of the training. And we broke away from that and worked together to bring the magic in as well, to go and study in the fields and actually dig up and work with the plants and make tinctures and bring in incantation and ritual and all kinds of different elements that are so important and integral to the craft that is herbalism. But yeah, we met there during this 4-year full-time scientific degree.
And so the plant, so it's almost like I imagine, you guys were seated together, in this cauldron of education, kind of scientific, and then it was like the plants pulled you back to the earth, and both of you were like, no, I think this is where we want to go. Like, let's go down that path together. And to have a sister, to have a partner to do that with, I think is a dream so many of us herbalists have, is to find someone you can partner with for this type of journey. So Fiona, tell me a little bit about what it was like when you guys first started. Like, did you start practicing? I remember reading in your work that it was more kind of medicine making. Is that right, when you first started?
Well, we came out of the degree actually before the end of our 4-year degree. We'd already started working together, and we were planning, we were creating remedies, and then we'd go out onto our first ever stall was on a car boot sale. Don't know if you have those in the States, where everyone opens the boot of their car. You meet in a field, everyone opens the boot of their car, and all of their tat drops out. It's a bit like going to a thrift store or something, and you can pick up bargains. And we went to a car boot sale with a lot of tat, but also with these bottles of nettle syrup. And we sold, in fact, we didn't even sell, we swapped one bottle for an old USB stick that someone had to promote their own company. But when we came out of our degree, you know, trained to be professional medical herbalists, what we realized was that, you know, not only were people not kind of queuing up to come and see us as herbalists, but the majority of the population, when we were out and about on our stalls, didn't even know what herbal medicine was anymore. Like, didn't even have it as a concept that you can harvest a plant, drink that plant to help ease symptomology or support you in some way. And we realized that we have to go right back to basics. And that's really where our social enterprise, the idea of creating this whole educational structure, came from. That's about proliferating plant knowledge to reconnect people, and not the idea that the knowledge is all kept within and we've paid for the knowledge and therefore, but this much more, everyone should have access to a bit of plant knowledge to be able to support themselves and their family at home. So that was the starting point for us, and making the remedies was a way of getting the herbs out to people, to places where they might not go looking for them, and then they could ask us questions and it could start the dialogue, and that might just be enough to pique their interest in plants, and then they might go on to learn or find out more.
Yeah. Yeah. And somewhere along the journey, didn't the government come in and say, you guys can't sell your tonics anymore?
Well, yeah, they did. And it's interesting because we're both really socially minded. You know, we're both really keen to where we see oppression, where we see difficulty, we're solutions orientated, and we try and shift things and change things. And the making the remedies, as Fee was saying, was always about getting the people support and help, but educating them. And then when we were written to, we got a letter telling us that what we're doing isn't legal. We kind of knew and expected that would come eventually, because we were very aware of the 2004 European Medical Directive, which is a bit of legislation that explains that herbal medicines cannot be sold across the counter unless they are registered and have gone through a series of tests. The series of tests are 3 years of pharmacological grade testing, which includes animal testing. And that's not something that we would have ever done. Even if it had cost £1, we wouldn't have done that. But at the time, it was £90,000 per product. So, you know, apart from the fact of that astronomical finance, the morals and the ethics of what that means don't align with us. And that time was particularly challenging, but it also kind of showed us that we can't work within the system that we live in. We can't work within the framework. And that is because it's a broken system that's set up. You know, capitalist system's broken. And I think most of the world can see that now. We learned a crazy fact the other day, because we were having discussions over dinner, and we learned that the UK government is in debt for over £2,000 billion. And I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I'm sure the American government is also in debt, and the Canadian government. You know, we're just living in this fake system that's crumbling around us. And the important thing that we see now is that we need to educate as many people as possible. Firstly, to be really kind. Kindness is key in all times of shift and change. And secondly, that they can take care of themselves and their family and community with what the earth is providing. And we feel so privileged that we have this education and this connection with the plants and an ability to communicate. We've been so lucky at having amazing publishers. We've got this incredible family of publishers, Watkins, here in London. They're one of the oldest esoteric presses in the UK, and they've got an old shop in the centre of London. And they've been so supportive. We've got a team of female editors and artists that we've been working with for years now. And that's able to get this message and our words and our knowledge across and out there. So we're very lucky, and we can see solutions. We can see ways of helping people. And that's really gratifying.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like the plants that you speak for, your adaptability as herbalists to be able to just sort of be in the field and figure out, oh, this isn't working, or here's a block, but here's an opportunity, and to move into education and also activism. I think it was, you know, I mean, it might not have been a bold move for you because of kind of where you started from, but I think it's a bold move for a lot of people who are in the field of to say, you know what, no, we are going to go out into the community. And you know, both of you have started community gardens throughout your area. You offer tactile hands-on courses, and you know, just the ability and the adaptability that you've had to really, yeah, kind of like maneuver around is pretty phenomenal. Where do you get the energy? Like, what motivates or inspires or supports you?
Borage.
We are ever supported by the herbs and each other, and nourished by our wider community, family. But I mean, we do feel very lucky that throughout, you know, there's always hardships and challenges in life, and you know, it might be that one of us is struggling in certain areas more than others with family or whatever, and we are there to back each other up in that sense. But I think that in terms of the wider picture of the energy and we were around a fire at a friend's party many years ago, and we were sitting there by the light of the fire, and we were discussing what our plan B might be. And this, I'd been in America and in the States, and there was a sign that had God has no plan B written on it. And I was just like, if I took a photo of this sign and brought it back, and we were sitting around this fire, and we were talking about what might our plan B be if this doesn't work. You know, I mean, the thought that you can't reconnect people back to nature was, I don't even know why we were talking about it, but this big bear of a man whose name we can't remember now, but this wonderful man, he was like a gentle, very pragmatic, practical soul. He said, you just don't have a plan B. You know, he said, whatever your goal is, you make that the aim, and it might be that you meander throughout. And I think we've had to learn that things take longer than we're expecting them to. We've had to learn great patience and trying to set foundations in place before we build on them. We've had to learn a lot through the whole process, but with this goal in mind that, you know, that we want to get people reconnected and actually change the paradigm of the current attitude towards personal health that's been affected massively by the NHS, the National Health System here. The free healthcare system is an amazing institution that's been completely disbanded over the last decade or so, tragically. But it's also an institution that's kind of eaten itself, because it's led people to become dependent on that model of healthcare where you go to someone with an issue rather than being your first port of call. And that's not removing the importance of specialists in all areas, including herbalism. very much so in herbalism, but that we can actually take that a step back and have plants growing near us and know what their names are and how to work with them, and that would take the pressure off these healthcare systems that we have developed. So yeah, I think we've just kept the plan in mind and we're just heading towards it bit by bit. And
So
yeah.
having each other, because as herbalists, you learn, you understand about nutrition, you understand about what herbs do support adrenal glands, what herbs can bolster your energy, but that doesn't mean that you do it because you understand it. But having each other, we can kind of affirm, right, we're going to do a spring detox together, and we keep each other on track. Or, you know, if I sometimes add a new plant friend into my mix, I say to Fee, oh, you know, Leonoris, motherwort's being really helpful for me this month. And it's just little prompts, because you know that the adage, you can lead a horse to water but you cannot make him drink. And I think a lot of humans have that. We might know what's good for us, but actually doing the thing that supports us isn't always, there's often a block. So many people that I know, and myself included, can be the best self-saboteur and make the wrong choices. But by having a sister and being on a mission together, we can keep each other in check a little bit more. So that's incredible support. And that's also what we're trying to do. We've got a coven and a group of people that we work through each moon together with, and we all try and keep each other in check. And I think that's an incredible lesson that we've learned through plants. We were looking at nettle roots last weekend all together, and it's amazing when you unearth the nettle roots and you can see the way that they grow together in this amazing mat, and because their rhizomes all mix into one another, and they do create this solid community of support and communication. And the plants teach us so much about how to stay healthy, vigorous, and energetic. So it's trying to follow their lead as much as possible.
That's beautiful. I think, especially after COVID and so much isolation, I feel like, you know, people are coming out and looking around like, okay, where are my friends? Where are my people? Where are my allies? So it's wonderful. I'm doing a similar thing here in Minnesota, where I have little garden gatherings, and once a month women come over and we just have tea, and we, you know, they basically help me garden, and then they get to go home with a bunch of things. Then we talk about plants, and we have themes. And you know, I think this idea of bringing it back to our communities at a local level. And you know, I think I went through a similar training. It was a 3-year full-time course, led by Simon Mills, who you probably are familiar with from the UK. He was my super clinical supervisor. And you know, we have a lot of knowledge, but you know, even if you knew 2 plants really well, you could host a gathering in your local community and share this knowledge. And I think one of the things that I think we share is this idea that herbal medicine is community medicine. It's the people's medicine. Everyone should have access. And yeah, there's if we kind of let the plants lead the way, you know, if we really get close to the earth, close to the plants, they'll tell us. Like the plants talk to me too. I know some people think that's crazy, not our listeners. They hear it too. But they'll, you know, they'll kind of they'll give little nudges and little nods of encouragement as things go. And I love that you're doing that in the UK for your community. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the name of your book and your program, which is Sensory Solutions, and the role of the senses. And so tell me about how that's connected to kind of the heart of your work.
So when we came out of university and we had this sort of convoluted medicalized jargon in order to talk about health within the body, we realized that people they might think that, you know, you've got this incredible knowledge and then start looking to you for advice, but that they wouldn't really truly understand the words that we were speaking. And we had to completely break down all of that medicalized language and start to rebuild things in terminology where people could really understand, and also directly connect with the plants and the herbs that they were working with. So we found that working through our senses, so our taste, our sight, observing the plants, where they grow, how they grow, which plants they grow alongside, and then, you know, the taste, and also that more extrasensory feelings of what images or memories are conjured up, what feelings arise, what parts of the body can you sense the herb in while you're working with it. And we just started to layer up this understanding of how you can interpret the things you experience through interacting with the herb into understanding a language of the plants, in terms of how the plants can benefit us and how we can work to help support the plants. So the senses became a really important part of that. And we always start, well, we like to encourage people to grow herbs, or certainly go out and be with them in the wild, but to actually, first of all, say hello to the plant and then sit and observe and start to draw the plant. You know, and that just being the first port of call, you can learn so much from a herb just by, you know, these detailed observations. So the senses became really important in creating almost like a structure for people to be able to access the knowledge and the information, because we're very creative. We we love bringing expression and creativity into our work with plants. But we realized that if you just tell someone to go and sit with a plant, they get a mental blocks quite often if they're not used to just being able to express and interact in that way. So we realized that people really like a structure to work within, and that then they can feel more free to go and explore themselves. So we created this structure of sensory herbalism as a roadmap into plant connection, really.
It's been quite interesting, because sometimes people say that they are very interested in herbal medicine, but they could never study it because their brain isn't scientific. And we wanted to bridge that slightly. So we started to break apart the tastes in particular and the flavors, and translate tastes and experiences within the mouth into isolated compounds or chemical constituents within the herbs, just to show people. So for example, when a mouth goes completely dry, there's astringency, which can be called tannins. And this is all the same information, just in different languages. And or when you have an incredibly bitter taste in your mouth, these bitter compounds are going to have an effect on the digestion. Or when something's very sweet, potentially it could be polysaccharides, which, you know, can be a storage for a root or a seed. So it's just being able to express the language of science in a way that doesn't make people feel scared, because it's as much our language as the magic is. And we're trying to smash apart the idea that science is highbrow and academic and belongs to a different set of people than ritual and words like aura or scrying or divination, because it's all part of the whole. And herbs have been here supporting us since the beginning, since we first arrived as our species. And we have this forever relationship. So by layering up this relationship with all of the knowledge that's ever been amassed, gives us the sum of all the parts, which is what we believe is what should be accessible to all people, because community herbalism is offering that level of access. And you know, when you explain things like that with tastes that people can actually feel themselves, it breaks down the wall of, I cannot ever attain this information because my brain doesn't work like that.
I love that. That's so important that, you know, people get an embodied experience. And what you guys are doing is you're giving them the opportunity to embody these different compounds and giving them access to this. And, you know, one of the things I've been doing, because I have two kids, I have a 7 and a 5-year-old, two girls, and they're in the garden with me and they know, you know, more plants, you know, than it's pretty amazing what they pick up. And I've just, you know, I've been so motivated by teaching kids because I think, you know, children have a natural curiosity and openness to learning connections and patterns. And, you know, I know that you both, you know, both of you in your work have worked with kids and you're trying to kind of retrain all generations. But I do think like the kids are like, just, I mean, they're ready for it. Like, they're like, well, what's that bird? What's this plant? You know? And I think my parents' generation had no idea. I don't know the bird's name. I don't know the plant's names. It's just green. Don't eat it. It could kill you. but I think now more, you know, the more people we have on the ground teaching the kids the names of things to differentiate is it's so empowering, and it engenders a sense of connection and protection, right? To
yeah, definitely. And it's a special skill being able to work with big groups of children, that we decided that's not where we want to put our energy. You know, we're both parents and we've got grandchildren, and it's lovely working within a family unit when a child wants to learn. But we we discovered very early on that taking on a big group of kids when a few of them don't want to learn can be extremely challenging. And so we decided that what we'd be interested in was actually influencing the curriculum, various curriculums, and supporting teachers, existing professionals who work with kids, and giving them lesson plans, which is what we set about doing, getting involved with local primary schools and forest schools and the scouting movement, and offering ideas about sensory interactive workshops.
that
But
is amazing.
also actually, you know, for them to connect, because it, you know, primary school teacher, a kindergarten, or a, you know, what's your first school called before high school? What do you call that?
We call it elementary.
Yeah, elementary school teachers, if they don't have the knowledge, if they don't know an oak tree from a birch tree, suddenly expecting them to be able to teach that to children. So we did start running workshops for actually just the basics of connecting teachers in with, you know, this is a mint plant, or this is a marshmallow or a chamomile, or, and getting trugs of herbs planted up outside the staff room so that they can go and pick off a bit of the herb and have it in their tea, and that becomes something that's more part of their daily routine, which is them more likely to filter down and pass on to the kids. So we also realized that shift, you know, to be able to teach loads of kids, we needed to teach the teachers. It's, you know, it's a huge branch of work, a piece of work that we've planted the seeds in, but that, you know, that that time, energy, so it's a whole it's one of the roads that we will be traveling, but that's going bit by bit. And you try things out, you know, when we try things out as well and see what works, and get feedback. And, you know, there's forest school teachers, so people are taught how to teach kids how to build fires, for example, and they're in nature, but up until very recently, lacking from that was sort of identification of woodland trees and plants. And so, yeah, we've been working with forest school leaders who train the forest school teachers as well, so that, you know, it's just all these different angles you can get in there with.
What we found was that through community gardening spaces, you access multi-generational groups, and kids come with their grandparents. And in gardening spaces like that, you often have such varied skills. You get incredible knowledge from so many different aspects of the natural world, nature, how to create biochar, and composting experts, and people who've spent their life dedicated to specific insects or fungus. So we decided to put our energy and focus into supporting and inspiring community medicine gardening in particular. And that's been incredible, a brilliant journey. That you can never become an expert in nature, because there's always another facet. You know, it's when people talk about the universe, that it's ever expanding and ever growing. That's the way we see nature as well. Because, you know, if you think, we always feel a bit weird when people introduce us as experts, because it happens sometimes on panels or at conferences. People say, you know, the Seed Sisters are experts, and we both go, no, just, you always feel like a novice when it's about nature, because it's absolutely impossible to know even a fraction, because it's so vast and ever expanding.
And there's theory, isn't there? But until you put things into practical, you know, I remember with the piece of land here, you know, even deciding whether to regenerate meadowland or plant forest garden and where to do that. And I remember contacting the Permaculture Society in the UK and going, there's this bit of land and we can't decide which method to use to help restore this bit of meadowland. And they were like, well, it's permaculture, you experiment, don't you? Split it in half, try this on that half, try that on the other half, and see what works. And I was like, okay, everyone's experimenting with regeneration of biodiverse spaces, you know, and we're learning so much as we all go along, from different practices, you know, and farming practices historically have always changed as well. And it's about finding what works for the land, for the people that are working with the land, for what, you know, reciprocally the plants and you need or want from the land. So there's so much to take into account, let alone, you know, soil production, like composting and hedge laying and, you know, wildflower seed collection and what trees go well together and what doesn't grow under a walnut tree. And it's like, whoa. So, you know, but just taking those first steps and getting going is the start of bringing people together. And yeah, and also, you know, it being a space for people to gather in and actually bringing people together and becoming part of that space.
Yeah, you make it sound so reasonable to do. And maybe after we end, if you have any resources I might be able to share with our listeners, to how, you know, maybe any pamphlets you have or places that you would, books that you would recommend for people to start their own community gardens. I would love that. And I think our listeners would love that too.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, we've got a web page dedicated to it with a PDF.
Perfect.
You know, it's a bit kind of focused on the UK, but I'm sure it can be adapted.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I don't want to run out of time before we talk about your new book, Poison Prescriptions, which I just want to say, I know to people who are watching or listening, you can't feel it, but this is like one of those books that feels good. It's like you hold it and and the way that the pages, like the paper, all of the artwork in here, it's one of those books that you want to keep on your desk because it's just, yeah, it's not only full of amazing information, but it feels so good like that. And it smells good. It has all the things that for me make up a sensory book. I'm a double Taurus. I'm a sun and moon Taurus. So for me, like the senses, I'm very important to me. So when I picked up this book, I was like, oh yeah. But let's talk about what's in it, because I think that's equally as important. So Poison Prescriptions. Tell me about what led you to start to talk about plants like datura and belladonna and some of these herbs that kind of have fallen way off the radar for people in the modern times.
Yeah, we've we, you know, talk about herbs leading the way. So these herbs, the so-called witching herbs, or the nightshade family in particular, have been some of the plants that have really guided in a very powerfully magical way our journey. And we came, you know, into contact with these plants as teens, but together after we met in our, you know, in the early 2000s, we started working much more closely with these plants. At one particular herb gathering together, we came across flying ointment, belladonna flying ointment, for the first time. And we were also doing a piece of work on this sort of herbalist course together on datura. And it was this magical setting with the mist hanging over the fields and the full moon rising, and this tent with Cayley folk music playing. And we were all Christopher Headley, our mentor, who's no longer with us, you probably know Christopher Headley, he had put belladonna flying ointment on our wrists and was whirling us around into these almost what felt like altered universes. And at that event, he spoke about herbalists will save the planet, and that herbal medicine is a broad church, as in there is space for every kind of herbalist here. And it was with those plants that we learned that regardless of what we're being told is the right way to do things, that we really can trust in the plants and in our knowledge, or scientific knowledge that overlays all of that. But that we felt that herbal medicine is quite an edge of, was then certainly quite on the edge of society, and that with our interest in plants that can bring that magic and those slightly altered states, that we were kind of walking the edge of the edge. And we were working with those plants for years and years, and then realized that they've got a very big historical story of use within magic, but they're also very powerful medicines for the medical herbalist. You know, we put them in asthma prescriptions, for tremors of Parkinson's, for hot flushes. We use different nightshade family, but they sort of led us down this path of, there needs to be this bridge between the magical and the medical, even within herbal medicine, that quite often medical herbalism can sometimes become very focused on becoming medicalized, and that those plants really represent rebridging that gap between the more ethereal magical and the physical medicine.
They just ended up in our gardens, you know. We didn't plant the datura or the belladonna or the henbane, and they turned up, they self-seeded, and we're like, hi, we're here. And when plants do that, it's like when someone pops round for tea that you might never have met and just goes, hello, I'm going to change your life. And if you are so willed, you'll open the door and let them in. And we opened the door fully and let them in, and they have bestowed us with incredible gifts and pure fantastical magic and information. And when we decided to write the book, we decided that after many years of clinical practice and working with the plants, cultivating the plants, collecting their seeds, spreading them all over the place as well. But the actual writing of the book took us to old dusty libraries and different rabbit holes, and learning for ourselves that these plants have been intertwined with alleviating pain in humanity. You know, these plants are the root of anesthesia that make modern surgery possible. And so many aspects of these plants live on, so that their mythology, the old stories. So, for example, with henbane is written about in Greek mythology, and people wore wreaths of henbane around their crowns to cross the river Styx onto the other world and the underworlds. And today in medicine, where people are in hospices or dying, they're often administered a derivative of henbane, hyoscine, because that helps to dry up secretions in the lungs, which are often a big problem, especially with the elderly who are in the last few stages of life. And it just goes to show how the ancients knew, we knew and we know as humans how these plants can alleviate suffering. And the word poison is quite interesting, because when you look at the root of poison, it's actually potion. And these plants are the original potions. And they're so maligned. They're so, people are scared of them. People write absolutely awful things about them. If you open a herbal ID book, sometimes they're described as though they're disgusting looking. And this way that they've been demonized is akin to the way women have been demonized and oppressed, especially the wise older woman who might live on her own and has been called a witch. And these plants, known as the witching herbs, have kind of followed the same path of demonization as many of us as women. And it feels ripe at this time for women and these plants to re-step into the limelight and kind of smash the patriarchy.
And for the listeners who might not know, when you see Seed Sistas, or Seed Sista, it's the A is the anarchy, the A with the circle around it, which, yeah, I mean, I think that's, I love what you're saying, how these plants they've been really pigeonholed, or like, kind of, yeah, demonized. So what is your hope and takeaway for people who are reading this book? Like, what are you hoping that they can glean from all the treasures that you've gathered about these plants?
I guess our biggest hope is that people have the time and opportunity to grow them for themselves and learn to make friends with the plants that might be feared in a safe way. We've tried to set out safety precautions and understanding that, yes, these plants can kill, but so can many others that haven't been demonized in the same way. And we hope that people learn to appreciate and love them as much as we do. And I think that the plants themselves seeded this book, and it's like a platform for them to get into the souls and the lives of others.
And to understand that every plant represents so much about our journey as humans and part of nature on this planet. And it's a real celebration of, in particular, 3 herbs: datura, thornapple, henbane and belladonna. And the first part is our kind of take on magical practice, and how even that can be an emerging tradition for us. Every magical practice or even medicine structure has been developed in response to the people, the plants and the land of that time. And we can bring aspects of the ancient through, which will always happen when we're working with plants, because they have all of that ancestral knowledge within them, but that we can also apply magic to today's environment. And we don't need to feel confined by what's written by people historically, even about what magic is, or and this is it's a cry to people. It's an invitation for people to feel more empowered within their own magical practice, as well as their connection with the plants, and marrying all that together. And the last part is all about the flying ointment and the history of the flying ointment and how we work with it, and what you can do yourselves to get into that preparation.
Yeah, and I guess that's the flying ointment aspect is, you know, today there's a real buzz around connection to nature. It's kind of become like a trend. So a lot of people talk about the importance of connection to nature. And when we looked at this historical preparation that's called the flying ointment or the green unguent that contains these Solanaceae herbs, among others, there's a very important message about connection to self and the fact that we are nature. And through our own self-pleasuring sexually, that's one incredible way that we connect to nature to access the divine. And because of the layering and layering and layering of the oppression and shame, it's become a taboo subject that's just not spoken about. And that's another hope for the book, that it will free any shame, especially for women, around wanking. And that's that feels like really important work.
It is important work, and I am so grateful to you two as friends, and I will now call you my sister. And because I think, yeah, what you've done in this book is you've really, I think, opened up a portal for women to explore the holism of themselves and the holism of the plants, and how magic and mystery and incantation, all of that is part of who we are. You know, we're just sort of bringing it back together with the plants in its sort of original but updated form. So I am so grateful to the work that both of you are doing for this book, and I'll include a link in the description of this talk, and you can also find it on the Seed Sistas website. Can you give everyone their website in case they have a pencil and pen, or a pen nearby?
Seedsistas.co.uk, and that's sisters with an AS at the end, sisters, because we're like, well, cool.
Awesome. So yeah, I'll include that link to your book. You have a few other books, so I'll include links to all of your coursework. You guys have a YouTube channel. I keep saying you guys, you ladies.
We're
reprogramming.
We're down with guys. It's okay.
So I'll include all of that so that folks can find you and support your work and be inspired, just as I am from all the beautiful things you're doing.
And thank you for your work as well. It's lovely to be here and meet you and have this chat. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a really nice conversation with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening to today's podcast. And if you have questions, you can always place them in our comment section. You can email the Seed Sistas. I'll include their contact link. You can email me. And as always, please subscribe if you like my channel. I have to say that because it really does help. And the more more people that follow and subscribe, the more this type of work can spread throughout the world, so that more and more people can have access to the beauty and the magic of plant medicine. So thank you, everyone.